See two Michaels. Hey, Patricia, Charles, Sherry. Hey. So, night 9 of Bourbon and Scary Stories with yours truly. Thanks for coming back in. Hope you all had a good day. So tonight, might have a little shorter night. We're going to do 2 stories tonight. And tomorrow night, I'll probably wrap things up. And then we'll do House in Old Louisville. And then we'll start me reading and telling stories from Voodoo days at La Casa Fabulosa. Mike says they got rain in Florida. Okay. Hey, Greer, Kim, Donetta. Glad you're all checking in. Hey, Laura. So we keep getting new people. I don't know if she popped in yet, but several years ago there was a French girl who was in town. She came and did one of our tours, and she loved it. She was back in Louisville the next year, brought her friend, and so I saw she tuned in last night. So we're getting people from all over, which is really great. So we're talking about America's Most Haunted Neighborhood, and stories come from my 11th book, True Ghost Stories and Eerie Legends from America's Most Haunted Neighborhood. This is a compilation of 3 of my earlier books that have been reissued by University Press of Kentucky. You can get them on Amazon, but I always push this one because it's got like the best of, and it's the most edited and updated collection. Normally I'd be out and about March 15th through November 15th, almost every night at 7:30, telling stories and taking people through the neighborhood. But since we're kind of quarantined, I'm just going to get together and share the stories. And I've told most of the stories from the book. So like I said, tonight, looks like my hair is a mess, right? Tonight and tomorrow night we'll be wrapping things up. But if you haven't checked out our website, check it out, LouisvilleHistoricTours.com. We're working on a line of merchandise. There's a lot more coming, but there's a couple things you can get on the website. We're getting different shops set up, but right now we're promoting it as America's Grandest Victorian Neighborhood. We've got the designs for America's Most Haunted Neighborhood coming up in a bit, so keep watching. And thanks to Sean Stafford, my friend, who's doing all kinds of great website stuff, helping us get some recognition and promoting our tours and promoting the neighborhood. Hey, Sue. So everyone got their bourbon? If you're just checking in, make sure you say hi. Tell people where you're from, city and state. If you're from out of the country, please let us know. We like seeing people outside the United States. And if you're drinking bourbon, let us know what bourbon you're drinking tonight. So tonight I am doing Booker's. So a little different than the other nights. Okay, so cheers, everyone. Hey, Tim. Margie, Adam, good to see you all checking in. So, our first story's a pretty short, sweet story, but it's also on Millionaires Row. The last 2 nights, our stories concentrated on Millionaires Row. Millionaires Row, in case you don't know, is the old 3rd Street in Louisville. It was the first paved street in town, and back in the late 1800s, it's where a lot of the movers and shakers built their mansions. And there's 10 blocks of beautiful mansions with all these wonderful styles representing the late Victorian era. And, you know, this neighborhood fell on hard times in the 60s and 70s, but in 1975, it became a historic preservation district. People began moving back down there. And back in the day, you know, probably 85% of these houses, these mansions, were chopped up into apartments and turned into rooming houses. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Gina. Hey, Jim. And that's turned around today. Most of them are back to being single-family houses. So they're saying Old Louisville is going to be the new Savannah, the new Charleston. And one of the reasons is because we've got so many great ghost stories. They say you can't go more than half a block in the neighborhood without there being a supposedly haunted house. Hey, Wendy, Lisa, Steve, Bob, glad you're coming. So the place I'm going to tell you about tonight, a lot of people know. It's a huge Beaux-Arts mansion that's at 1310 South 3rd Street. And at one time, it was the grandest home in all the city. It took almost 5 years to build. It cost $100,000 back then. That was an immense quantity of money. And today, it's headquarters for the Filson Historical Society. So everyone in the neighborhood, people in Louisville, know this. John Filson was Kentucky's first historian, and he wrote the history of Kentucky in 1788. So this is an institute that kind of honors his memory. And their mission is kind of keep Ohio River Valley culture, history, art alive. They have Kentucky artifacts. They've got great genealogical records. And you pay to become a member, and you can go in and use their libraries and databases. If you haven't seen it, it's beautiful. They recently expanded. They have a new addition with an auditorium. I did a book signing there not too long ago. And they've been there since roughly the 1980s. And that's when it acquired a reputation for being a haunted place. So the first mention I ever heard about ghosts at the Filson came from a man by the name of Don, and he's the one that told me about the Lady of the Stairs. He used to park his car on 3rd Street across from where the Filson Historical Society is, and he was in his car. It was idling one night. He was warming up, ready to go home after work, and he saw the Lady of the Stairs and kind of put me on her trail. But he said some strange things had happened in the Filson Historical Society as well. And a lot of the people who worked there, they were kind of hush-hush about it, but he got one of his co-workers to come and talk to me. So I got it from 2 different sources that told me this. But they supposedly had a ghost that they called Sally. And Sally was a poltergeist. Poltergeist is usually a mischievous kind of spirit. A lot of times when you hear knocks and things being moved around, they attribute that to poltergeist activity. Things that are broken. Poltergeist in German means noisy ghost. And what seemed to happen is Sally had an affinity for books, and not surprising, some of the rooms in the mansion were turned into libraries and reading rooms. So people who had experiences with Sally, as she was known, said they'd be in one of the reading rooms at the front of the house, and they would walk by a bookshelf, and they'd say, like a book would just kind of hop off the shelf and land in front of them or behind them as they were walking by. Sometimes people who were in the room said an entire shelf of books would kind of come tumbling out, like someone was behind, pushing each book out, one after the other. This happened for a number of months, these 2 people said. But the strangest thing they had happen was the strange formation of books that kept appearing and reappearing. So Don's coworker friend was the person often who would come in the morning and turn on the lights and kind of get the building ready for the day. And she said she came in one day, turned on the lights and got things ready, and she went up to the 2nd floor at the top of the stairs, and she was in this reading room, which is kind of in the middle of the house at the front. There's a balcony there over the front door looking out over 3rd Street. And she gasped because she saw that all the bookshelves in the room were empty, and all the books had been taken down and they were laid out. Hey Ryan, how's it going? James, Carissa, Bob. And all these books had been taken down from the shelves, and they were laid out on the floor in the shape of a huge letter S. And the person who found this said it was kind of uncanny because if you tried to take, I don't know how many books were in the room, 5,000 or whatever, and you tried to build a big letter S on the floor out of these books, they said you never could have done it like this. They said the edges were perfectly straight and smooth, and all the books fit together. They were interlocking like a Chinese puzzle. Some were standing, some were horizontal, but it made this perfectly shaped letter S. And so this person put all the books back. They said it took all day to get the books back up on the shelves. But this kept happening several times. When they came in, they'd find all the books down on the floor in the shape of this huge letter S. And because this S kept appearing, that's when they started calling their ghost Sally, because they had to come up with a name that started with S. And, that's a nice old-fashioned name. And so when I found out more, I found another person who had experienced this at the Filson. That's when I started to do some research, and that's when I found out about the house being built in 1905, like I said, costing $100,000. And this was in the 1980s that these two people who I talked to told me about it happening. But it was before cell phones and stuff. Be nice, today we could always take pictures of that stuff, but not back then. Well, what I did when I did the research, I found some commonly known knowledge, but the place was built for a man named Mr. Ferguson, Edwin Height Ferguson. And the Fergusons were known for their lavish spending. Mr. Ferguson had made his fortune in the cotton and linseed oil refining business. And he was known for his extravagant entertaining. He probably should have saved some money, though, because not too many years after they moved in, Mr. Ferguson went bankrupt, and the family had to move out to smaller quarters. And that's when it became used for different purposes. Really, one family only ever lived in the mansion. People who knew the Fergusons bought the mansion from them, and they turned it into their family business. And that was very typical in the early 1900s. I mentioned this before. Right around the time of the First World War, people couldn't afford these places. They were having to pay income tax. Servants were expensive, especially if you had a staff of servants. And at the Ferguson mansion, they had supposedly 5 different servants who lived up on the top floor. So a family bought it. They moved their family business there. They lived up in the servants' quarters on the 3rd floor, and they were there for decades. And they eventually moved out, and then not too many years afterwards, that's when it became the Filson Historical Society. Well, I tried to find out if anyone died in the house. When you dig up old records, you're hearing about ghosts and things. You assume maybe something tragic happened, a murder, a suicide, and these places have been around 130 years on average, so they've seen some of these things. And I couldn't find out about anyone dying in the house or anything tragic there, except for the fact that they went bankrupt. But what I found out was that the Fergusons, they just had one daughter, and her bedroom, they say, was the one where the strange things would happen with the books. And what I found out is their daughter's name was what was it? Sadie or Sarah, I forgot. It was some S name. And I told the people at the the Filson, I said, I think your ghost's name isn't Sally. I think it's Sadie or whatever. It wasn't Sadie, but it's another S name, a common S name. And the Filson Historical Society people didn't like me messing around with their ghostly history. They kind of told me to knock it off. So I'm like, okay. Hey, Christina, Martine, Nancy. So I just kind of put that story on the back burner. But then a year or two later, I was doing some research on a different story, and I mentioned this before, as often happens. In looking for something different, I'll stumble across information about something else, and that's what happened. I was at the library, and I found an old postcard, and on the front was the Ferguson mansion, and it's a very striking building. I mean, if you know the Ferguson, the Filson, it stands out. Actually, let me show you a picture of it. Right here, that is the old Ferguson mansion, the headquarters for the Filson Historical Society. And what I found out was when the family moved in, the ones who bought it from the Fergusons after they moved out, it turns out that they were the famous Pearson family in Louisville. And in Louisville, the Pearsons are known as the funeral home people. So for decades, the Ferguson Mansion became the Pearson family funeral home, and they were there up until shortly before the Filson Historical Society bought it, and they moved their headquarters there. And the family, as I understood, they lived up on the top floor where the servants had lived before, and on the first and second floors, that's where they ran the business. They used the rooms for wakes and visitations. The morgue was in the basement. Supposedly they built caskets out in the carriage house. And I never did come up with an explanation, of who might be haunting the place. But what I did find out, oh, by the way, the daughter's name was Sophie. Okay, so it was an S name, not Sally. Sophie lived on to old age as far as I know. But what I came to conclude is, all those years it was a funeral home. There had to be at least one unfortunate customer by the name of Sally who passed through as a dead body. Yeah, that's right. John White Brown's headquarters was there when he was running for governor. And that was, I think, the place that had it just for a year or so before the Filson Historical Society moved in. Hey, Matt, Sophia, Melissa, Alexis. But, yeah, so, maybe there was a dead body by the name of Sally who passed through. It's a beautiful place. It's grand. It's one of the most elegant places on 3rd Street. Maybe this ghost named Sally decided to stay and haunt the place. So it's not my scariest, it's not my spookiest ghost story, but it's all I could come up with. But I think the thing about the books appearing like they did, in that strange S formation, and always they remarked on how perfectly shaped it was. They said if you took 5,000 books and tried to build a huge letter S out of it, you can never do it like they found it. Books perfectly interlocked, all the edges smooth and perfect. So that's the story of our Filson Historical Society. Okay, so the other one is a little spookier. We're going to move over to 1st Street. But if you're just checking in, tell people where you're from, say hi. Lori's in the dark. Beth, about what? Oh, Law in the dark. Okay. But yeah, let people know where you're from, what you're drinking. So next story, got to have another swig of bourbon. So cheers. And thanks for hanging out with me tonight. 9th night of bourbon and scary stories with yours truly. Cheers. And like I said, if you haven't, check out our website, LouisvilleHistoricTours.com. It's getting a really great makeover thanks to Sean Stafford. And we're starting to get merchandise up to promote the tours in the neighborhood. Another thing, if you're on Amazon.com, and if you haven't already, go on and give me a nice review of this book. That's one of the best things you can do for authors is give them a good review. So if you don't like it, don't like the stories, you don't have to do it. But if you can give me 5 stars, that really helps. You'd just be amazed what a 5-star review on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble can do for an author's ranking. So we were usually at 5 stars, like for all the different reviews average, but there's like a neighborhood grump that goes on there and puts bad reviews about my stuff every now and then. I know who it is, but I can't do anything about it. So if we can get some positive reviews there, that really, really does help. Or if you're on Audible.com, reviews there are great, and this is on Audible.com as well. So if you can help with that, that really helps me out as an author. If you're on TripAdvisor, go to Louisville Historic Tours and make sure you give us some love, give us a nice review and some stars. Just make sure you don't get us confused with the old Louisville Visitor Center in the middle of Central Park. That's kind of the competition. I used to do tours for them, but we kind of split ways several years ago. And so during the day, I will do the history and architecture tours, and at night I do the ghost tours. They just do some history and architecture tours during the day. So if you can give us some love on TripAdvisor or Yelp, just make sure it's Louisville Historic Tours, okay? So, on to our next story. So, a lot of times I'll be walking in the neighborhood, and especially when I first moved there, I would just spend hours walking and looking at the houses. 1,400 old houses and mansions in old Louisville. There's even today, 20 years later, I walk around and I see new things. It's just an incredible neighborhood, architecturally speaking. But sometimes I'll see a building or I'll see something, and you just know that there's something about that house, that there's a story there or something. And that's the case of 1135 South First Street. When I first saw it, I just kind of stopped. It caught my breath because the houses in old Louisville tend to be big, 3 stories, but this had an extra tower at the top on the 4th level. So there's probably 6 levels to this structure. Hey, Amy Brooks Hoffman and Wendy and Kim. Yeah, Grumpers. Thanks, Kim. But it's a really imposing building, and that Italianate tower just kind of really makes it stand out. And the first time I saw it, it was kind of foggy. All the fog from the Ohio River had kind of rolled in, and it was all kind of ground fog though. But the top part of the building was still, visible, and that I always remember that tower just kind of jutting up in the air. But I thought that place has got to have a story. And so I'd done some research. I talked to someone living there, and they said, yeah, we've heard about, something going on in one of the condos on the 2nd floor, but, I don't know any details. And it turns out sometime after 1975, the building, yeah, Michelle, it does look haunted, right? The building was turned into condos. And I know people who live there today. It's a beautiful place. But sure enough, I got in touch, or I was contacted by someone who was living there at the time. And she had, this was right after my first book came out, or I was in the process of working on it. I think she read a newspaper article about me working on the book. And she emailed me and she said, would you happen to know anything about 1135 South First Street? She said, I've had some strange things happen here, and if you could, help me, I'd be, thrilled. And, when she told me the street number, I didn't know what place it was. And so I remember I took the dogs for a walk, and I walked over there, and I saw it was this place. And I thought, oh, finally, someone's going to tell me something good. And so I emailed her back. I said, I've always wondered about that place. I said, I don't know anything about it offhand, but I'd love to hear, what you know. And so we met, and it was at 3rd Avenue Cafe. If any of you are old timers in the neighborhood, it was right down the block from where I used to live at 1228 South 3rd Street, the old Widmer House. And it was a great restaurant. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. But so we met and had lunch there, and she told me all this crazy stuff that she had been experiencing in her apartment. And so her name was Babette. She had graduated from Bellarmine University, where I teach. So I think I had just started at Bellarmine a couple years before that, and she had graduated, I don't know, like 10 years or so before. So we had this interesting Bellarmine connection. But she said she had just moved in the year before, and she's another one of these people, Babette, who said she never ever would have believed in ghosts until it happened to herself one day. And so she was interviewed for a magazine or something. They were doing a Halloween article, and she said she was talking to a reporter about it, and he was kind of skeptic about it. And she was kind of defensive when I was talking to her because she thought, I wouldn't believe her. And she said, well, I don't care what anyone says. She goes, I know what I saw, and that's all I need. But she had actually brought a friend along with her to lunch, and then her friend said, no, really what you need is an exorcist. And it turns out all her friends knew about what was happening in the apartment. But yeah, a lot of people are saying they missed 3rd Avenue Cafe. It was really good. But so what happened was Babette moved into her condo, and hers was on the 2nd floor, the south corner. So it was this place, these windows right here. And she moved in, and she was there half a year or something, and nothing really happened, she said. She said every once in a while she'd kind of miss something. you notice it wasn't in the right spot, or she'd hear little noises, but she said for the most part, nothing really happened. But once she was settled in, she said she started to feel like it was finally home. She said that's when she noticed things happening, things missing and things going lost. And she got to a point where she realized it wasn't just her being forgetful. It was like when she was asleep or gone, things were being moved on her. She said the first time she really noticed was she went to bed one night, and her glasses, which she put on her side of this big king-size bed where she slept. Hey, David, and hey, VG. She woke up, and the next morning they were on the bedside table on the opposite end of the bed, on the opposite side. And she said she thought, well, maybe she got confused or in the middle of the night moved them. But the next night, when she took off her glasses, she put them right next to her, and she made a conscientious, note of it. And when she woke up the next morning, they were on the other side. She said it would have been really inconvenient to kind of roll all the way over there and put the glasses there. So she said when things started happening like that, that's when she started to wonder, if there was something odd about her apartment. Well, that went on for a couple months, and then she started hearing doors slamming and loud noises. She was in her bathroom one day, and she heard the door slam loudly just once, and she knew it wasn't the door coming into the apartment. It had to be the bathroom door. And so she came out or went down the hallway and went to this bathroom, and the door was closed, and she thought maybe it was a wind or something. But as she stood there, the door opened and it slammed shut again, and then it opened and it slammed shut again, right in front of her. So she knew that this wasn't the wind. Someone was shutting this door. And she wanted to open the door and see what was on the other side, but she decided, not to. She was kind of afraid. Well, she went back into it was, it was a half bath down the hall. She was in that when she heard the door slam. And as she started to walk away, it kind of slammed again. And so she went out for a walk. She didn't want to have to deal with it. But from that point forward, she said she started to hear the door slamming. And it was always that one door. And it was always like 3 or 4 slams, one right after the other. One day, she was in her little bathroom. It was the bathroom off her bedroom, and she was getting ready. And she said she heard the door slam, and she had kind of become used to it by then. But this time it was only one loud slam, and so she kind of stuck her head out to see, if it was going to slam again. And when she stuck her head out, she was surprised to see that there was a little boy standing there. And at first she thought, her cousin had come, because she had a cousin who lived nearby, and her cousin would stop by, and her cousin was a babysitter, and often she'd bring the children, that she was taking care of along with her. But she realized no one else was there except the little boy. And that's when Babette realized there was something different about the little boy. He looked like he was maybe 8 or 9 years old. He was small, and he was very pale. She realized it was all black and white, what she was seeing. And then she realized his clothing wasn't something modern. It looked like clothing from, 70, 80, 100 years ago. And that's when all of a sudden she got goosebumps, because she said as she stared at him, she realized where his eyes were, there was nothing there. It was just like big black holes. And that's when the apparition just turned around. And she said it looked solid, but it had a strange color to it. But it turned around, and she kind of followed it for a step or two, and it walked through the door into the little bathroom where the slamming had happened. And she opened the door, and there was nothing there. So this happened 4 more times that she actually saw the apparition. And for the next 4 or 5 months, she said the same thing would happen. She'd hear the door slamming, things would go missing, and she kind of got used to this presence. And she said she never felt threatened, but every time she saw it, she was creeped out. It was very disconcerting. There was something about it, and but she was never, afraid for her life. About that time is when she said she started to have strange dreams, and she said she would dream very often, but she started having these really strange dreams. It was always involving children. Like she'd wake up in a room and there'd just be dozens of children standing there staring at her, and the children were always pale and lifeless. They had no expressions on their faces. But she would have these dreams over and over again. And from that point forward, she said she started to feel depressed, and she just had a different vibe in the apartment. It was just like there was a heavy atmosphere, and she just noticed a big change in her apartment. Well, that's when her friends started to intervene, and they said, well, you need to have a priest come, or move out or something, because they had heard most of these stories, and they had heard the encounters. They had heard that she had been seeing a young apparition, that of a boy, but she never revealed the fact that he didn't have eyes. She just said she had seen the ghost of a little boy, or she assumed as much. And so her friends, they wanted to bring in a priest, but she refused to have a priest come because she was afraid it would scare the little boy away. And she said she didn't want to scare him away. She had kind of grown protective of it. And so she finally agreed, she relented, and she told her friends that her mother knew a young guy that was supposedly a psychic, and that she would have her mother's friend to come. And she hadn't told anything to her mother, because I don't know why, but she hadn't told anything. So she asked her mother for this guy's number, and his name was Jim, and he came and decided to check out the apartment. And some of her friends were there when he arrived, and Babette says she was kind of surprised when he arrived because he was so young. He looked like he was a college kid. But and she had told him nothing about what was going on in the apartment. So she was kind of like me. Whenever I, put people in touch with a psychic, I always make sure they know nothing. If you're a real psychic, you should be able to pick things up. You don't need information beforehand. Well, Babette was kind of suspicious at first because he was so young, but she said the first thing he did after he introduced himself, he walked past her into the hallway where the door would slam, and he just stood there and he put his hands up and he said, there's something about eyes, there's pain here, there's darkness. And she said that kind of freaked her out because he went right to the spot where the door would slam and where the boy would show up. And the guy, the psychic, the medium, he walked around and he said, there's something about children here. There's all kinds of children, but that's all I can tell. He said, I don't get any names. I don't know any details. He says, I don't know, that a lot died here, but there's a lot of pain and suffering. And he said, that's all I've got. He says, sometimes it comes and goes. He said, it's kind of like, when something's on the tip of your tongue. He says, I get this feeling, I got a sense. He says, some days I can capture it and put it in words, and some days it's just a feeling. He says, that's all I'm getting, And so she thanked him, and she told him a little more. And she said, yeah, I've been seeing the ghost of a little boy, and he doesn't have eyes. And she said the last time he had appeared, she actually tried to approach him. She came out, she heard the door slam, and she was kind of expecting him to be there, and there he was. And she actually took a couple steps in his direction to kind of, approach him. And she said when she did, the little boy kind of put his hands up over his face, and he just disappeared, like he was running away or something. And so she thought maybe that would take care of things, but things started to get more active. One day, she heard the slam when she was in her bathroom. She went down to see, if the door was going to open and close like it had been doing. But then she realized she heard something in the kitchen. She went into the kitchen, and all the cupboard doors were being pulled out and pushed back in, and the drawers, the cupboard doors were opening and closing. She said it was like there were 10 invisible people there opening drawers and doors and pushing and pulling. And that is actually when she got in touch with me after she had the psychic come over. And that's when she sent me the email. And that's when we went and went to Third Avenue Cafe, and she told me all these details. So when I wrote down all her information and took notes, that's what I usually do. That's when I go and do the historical research, see what I can find out about the place. And I went down to the courthouse, and if you've ever tried to look up property deeds, it's kind of complicated. You have to find the current deed, find the deed number, go to that deed book, look it up, and like you have to go back and forth. And a lot of times they wrote the numbers wrong, and I wasn't able to find out anything about that building. I went to the Filson Historical Society and did some research there, and I was just going through old pictures, and I found a picture of the building, and it wasn't identified as a residence. It had a different caption underneath, and it kind of gave me chills when I saw what the caption was. But I wanted to, find out originally what the building was. I want some more proof. And so a writer friend of mine, John Schuler, he was also a title examiner. So I asked him if he could help, and maybe he could figure out the deeds. And so I gave him the address, and a week later I got a call from him, and he said, "Oh yeah," he goes, "I got the deeds back to pretty early. I'm not quite sure what happened, but we met, and what he found out was in 1920, that building was purchased by the Jewish Welfare Federation, and it was an orphanage. And the picture that I found in the Filson Historical Society called it the old Jewish orphans' home. And so it turns out it was an orphanage. From the deeds, we were able to find out that the Jewish Welfare Federation had started in 1910. They used to have a building on Garvin Place in Old Louisville, and in 1920 they moved to this building. And we can't tell if it was anything before. It doesn't really look like a building built in 1920. It looks more like an Italianate house from the 1890s or something. And I've seen similar houses that were turned into other things. For example, there used to be the old Norton Infirmary. It was an old mansion that they turned into a hospital. Hey, Abby. And so from 1920 to 1933, that was the Jewish orphanage. And after 1933, it became a convalescent home for sick children, all the way up to 1975. So there's substantiation that there was a lot of children in this building. And that, was kind of the end of the story, I thought. That kind of would explain maybe why there was a child there, why there were groups of children in her dreams. And so after that, we said goodbye, and I didn't really think I was going to hear from her. But several months later, it was right before Christmas, I got a call from her, and she's like, "Hey, it's Babette." She goes, "You're never going to guess what happened." She said, "I have a picture of the little boy. My cousin was here, and she took a picture, and he showed up. And you can actually see the shape, and you can see, like, there's just two black holes where the eyes are." She said, "It's really clear." She says, "You got to see it." And so we decided we'd meet after New Year's, and she'd show me the picture. And so we had set a date and time. And so in January, I remember there was still snow on the ground, I went over to her place and knocked at her door, and she's like, "Hi," and she's like, "Come on in." And she was like really crestfallen. She's like, "I got bad news." She said, "I don't have the picture." And I said, "What happened?" And she told me her cousin, the one that she thought, had come that one time with the children she was babysitting, she had been there, the day that she talked to me. And she had taken some pictures, and in one of the pictures, that's where the apparition of the little boy showed up, in the hallway where Babette always saw him. And she asked her cousin to, give her a copy. And remember, this was when we had digital cameras. we didn't have phones on our cell phone, or cameras on our cell phones and stuff. And so her cousin kind of reluctantly agreed, but her cousin, she said, was kind of religious, like fundamentalist, and she was very suspicious of ghosts and things like that. Anything dealing with ghosts and spirits, had to be demonic, she said. And so the cousin had agreed to give her a picture, but the next day when she called and asked, to get it, her cousin told her she had changed her mind. She had gone and talked to her pastor, and her pastor said, "Oh, that's dark stuff. It's satanic," and he made her destroy the picture, and she had to erase it from her little memory card. So there was no picture after all. So I said, "Oh, that kind of sucks." And we chatted a little, and I asked if she had anything else happen, and she said the door had been slammed. She hadn't seen him anymore, but she said it was kind of the same as before. So we went home. I went home, and actually it was the Thursday night dinner club. Then they came over, and we sat around, and people left around midnight, and I held the door open. I was saying goodbye to people. It was really cold out, and all of a sudden I thought about Babette and the little boy, and I thought, what I'd feel if I saw him. And I got goosebumps thinking about it, and I closed the door, and then the telephone started to ring. And I went to answer it, and it was Babette. And she said, "You're not going to believe what happened." She says, "I know who the little boy is." And so I sat down on the steps of the stair, and it took her about half an hour to tell me the story. But after I had seen her that afternoon, she said she had a date that night, and she had just gotten back from her date an hour or so before. And as she went into her building, she noticed there was a woman standing out on... Abby got heebie-jeebies last night? Good. But so Babette said she saw this woman standing on the sidewalk, just kind of staring at the building. And she assumed she must have been a homeless person, or, someone off their meds, because you see that a lot in old Louisville. So she went in and started to get ready for bed, but she went to her living room and closed the curtains. And when she closed the curtains, she looked down and saw the woman was still standing there on the sidewalk. And she realized the woman was standing there staring right up at her window. And so she stood there for a couple minutes, and finally she put her clothes back on, her coat, went down onto the sidewalk, and there the woman was just kind of entranced looking at the house. And she said, "Excuse me, can I help you? Are you okay?" And the woman kind of jolted. She'd been shaken from her reverie. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She said, "My brother and I used to live here. Did you know this was an orphanage at one time?" And Babette said, "Yeah, I just found out recently." She said, "The old Jewish orphans home?" And the woman said yes, and she introduced herself. Her name was Sarah Weinberg, and she lived in New Jersey. And she had come back to see some family for the holidays. And I forget how old she was, but she was like in her mid to late 80s. She was on up in years. And that's when Babette said she realized the woman wasn't a homeless woman. She was dressed very nicely. She had, a nice necklace on, a fur coat, and had a nice hairdo and everything. So she invited her up to her condo so the woman could talk a little more about what she knew. And so the woman sat down on the sofa and told her that in 1930, she and her brother, her twin brother, were brought to the Jewish Welfare Federation because their father had just died. And their mother had died of TB like when they were just 2 years old. And the father had, this was just the year after the Great Depression started. He had lost like the family business or something, and that's what led to his death. But they had distant relatives someplace, but they couldn't find them, so they were turned over to the Jewish Welfare Federation. And, they were twins, and they were best friends. And she said they were there for 3 years, till 1933. And she said, even though it was an orphanage and there were a lot of children there, she said they were never treated badly. they had a pretty, good life. They took care of them. They went to school. They were fed and clothed, and they said teachers and the people who took care of them were not mean people. They had a good life together. And so the brother and Sarah, after a year or so, they got to know all the nooks and crannies of the building. They found an old wine cellar down in the basement. They would get up into the very top tower room. They know how to get up there. And they'd love to play hide and seek, and they had their special little closet where they'd meet, and whenever they were playing hide and seek or they wanted to get away from the other kids or the teachers, there was this little closet where they'd meet, and it was a janitorial closet, and so the custodian kept his mops and buckets and cleaners and stuff in there. And she said what happened was, this was in 1933, she and her brother were playing hide and seek or something, and they were, I think, 8 at the time. And hey, Gina. And she said she and her brother were racing to go to that little closet to see who could get there first. And they were probably, they would, one would lock the other one out. That was kind of their game. But her brother beat her to the door. He opened and rushed inside to close the door behind him. But the janitor had been in there and left a big bucket full of undiluted bleach in the middle of the floor. And the little boy, he stumbled and he fell headfirst into this bucket, and all the bleach splashed up into his face. And it blinded him. They had to, his eyes were just totally destroyed. They had to remove them, she said. And he recovered, he was in bed for 2 months or something, she said. But he recovered, but, they had to send him someplace else. They were going to send him to a school for the blind now. And that meant that he was going to be separated from his twin sister. And it was right when the Jewish orphans home closed down, right when it became the convalescent home. But they kind of tore the two apart, and the little boy was heartbroken. He was losing his sister, and he just kind of withered away, and he died not too long after that. He just kind of gave up, and they think it was probably, there was more damage to his eyes and stuff than what they had thought. That was probably the cause, but she said he died because they were separated and he kind of had a broken heart. And the thing is, where Mrs. Weinberg wasn't 100% certain because so many years had passed, but which picture, Lisa? I don't know. Oh, this one back there? I don't know. Maybe it's one of those pictures like the eyes follow you and stuff. But she wasn't 100% certain, but Mrs. Weinberg was relatively certain that that closet where they used to meet and hide out was the bathroom in Babette's condo. So she thinks that's what happened. The little boy died, and she was seeing his ghost. 6 months later, she moved to California, but I talked to her once after she moved because her story then appeared in my second book, and she said the day before she left, she had heard the door slamming, and she said things still went, but getting bad. It kind of faded out here. But yeah, that's the ghost of the little boy at the Jewish orphans home, 1135 South 1st Street. So that, with the missing eyes and stuff, kind of creepy. Okay, so Kim says the face keeps changing. Yeah. So is it this one right there? That one? Yeah, that's my niece Isa. So I'll have to tell her. She's creeping people out. All right. But that was our round of stories for tonight. So like I said, we didn't have too many long stories. Now, what time is it, by the way? I can't see what time it is. But yeah, tomorrow night I've got a couple more. And maybe the night after, I'm not sure if I can get another round of stories, but either the night after tomorrow night or the night after that, we'll talk about the house in old Louisville. We'll go out with a bang, the old Richard Robinson house on 4th Street. And then we'll start reading from my favorite book, my memoir, Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa, an unconventional memoir about the first year or so we were in this house and all the strange things happened. And it's when I found out about the witch's tree and started meeting these people who told me about their haunted houses. So cheers. Thanks for tuning in. If you're just tuning in or watching this after the fact, if you can get on Amazon.com and give, well, both books, actually, if you can give us some stars, a 5-star review really helps us. Helps me as an author. If you're on TripAdvisor, Louisville Historic Tours could use some love. Yelp, we're on there. Just looking forward to the day when I can be out on the streets and taking people around and telling these stories in person. Check out our website, LouisvilleHistoricTours.com. We'll be giving updates when we can finally start up the tours again. We're slowly getting some merchandise up there, so if you want to promote Old Louisville as America's grandest Victorian neighborhood, there's t-shirts and things like that already. The Louisville Historic Tours logo is there. You can get t-shirts with that. And yeah, that's it for tonight. So tune in tomorrow night for night 10, and I hope you all have a great night. Just so you know, I can't read all the comments as they're coming in, but I do go back and I try to read all the comments, and I try to reply or at least like or heart your comments. So if I miss one of your comments or don't like one of your comments, sorry, I try to keep up. But we've been getting a lot of comments. Like, we're getting 500 comments for each night. We're usually getting around 600 views in all once people have gone back and looked at it. So it's great. People from all over the world, but see a lot of my Kentucky people, and like I said, it's great to see my old friends online. It's great to see my new friends and people I haven't met in person yet. So I hope when this is all over, you can come and see us in old Louisville and let me show you these places I've been talking about. So hope you're all doing really well. And hang in there, and see you tomorrow night, all right? So thanks. Take care. Good night.